And outside the box reviews, Sergeant D is coming, and you're on his list. We're looking at the NECA Stormtroopers of Death Sergeant D figure. And in this review, we are going to speak English! Mostly because the Texas Independent School District thought the best way to teach Spanish was to show the movie Selena 800 times, so I have no clue how to speak any other languages. But yes, this is the mascot of the crossover thrash band Stormtroopers of Death, band that I listened to mostly because it had people from Anthrax associated with it, and at the time I discovered this album, I was getting really heavily into the big four of thrash metal, and when I heard about this crazy album that was like half an hour long but had a stupid ridiculous number of songs on it, some of them only being a couple seconds in length, I had to check it out and see just how fast this thing really was. And I am surprised that NECA did this figure, because while Sergeant D's face graces the cover of their album, and I think he was on the second album. I actually never listened to their second album. I don't think they ever got beyond a second album, if I remember right. But Sergeant D just wasn't a obvious character for NECA to be putting out. I don't think he has the recognizability of Eddie from Iron Maiden or Vic Rattlehead of Megadeth that they've already done. But I'm not really complaining, and I kind of do wonder if this is because they did have a deal with Scott Ian to make a Scott Ian figure, and I kind of wonder if there's some dealings going on where this was just something that Randy really wanted to do, and because he got it in with Scott, he was like, hey, how about we make a Sergeant D as well? I think I've rambled on long enough so far that you probably could have listened to about half of the album of Speak English or Die, so let's just take a closer look at the figure. For accessories, we get a gun. I don't know crap about guns, so I'm not even going to attempt to say what this is, but it is decently sculpted. It looks like some of the stuff we've gotten before with previous figures in like the Commando line or something, but it's pretty much just a solid color, no real paint variants. It looks like it has some spots where it's like greasy. I think that like mold release grease on it. So I really don't think it's a paint deco of any kind. It does have the strap here that's loose, so you probably could put it over his shoulder or something like that. And actually I think this is removable looking at it, because it looks like it actually hooks on here at the back and hooks on there at the front. So you probably could take this off if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave it in place. Sergeant D does come with a trigger finger hand, and you kind of have to play with it a little bit to get it in there, but he will hold it. He gets his finger on the trigger just as he's supposed to. Can't complain about that at all. I was looking back at one of my old reviews of a Terminator figure the other day, and I think it was one of the ones from Genesis where he couldn't even hold the gun he came with correctly. So seeing a figure that can hold a gun correctly, I guess it's a low bar, but I'm happy they cleared it. For sculpt and paint, I think they knocked the head of Sergeant D out of the park. The image on the album cover is a very sketchy kind of image. I think that's how Scott Ian drew him. It was just like a doodle in a notebook. I think it was Scott Ian that drew him. I might just be talking to my ass because I haven't read anything about Stormtroopers of Death in years, if you can't tell from me not remembering how many albums they have even. But anyway, it definitely captures what that artwork looks like. It's very skeletal, but kind of like a skin rotted on zombie, so there's still some depth before his eyes, and his flesh is all just right up close to his skull itself, but he still has some ears in there. We got his teeth with no gums. We got his stogie with a little bit of smoke coming out, which is great. I like that his eyes are like recessed in there. There's kind of a deeper blue around the bottom of his eyes, and he just keeps that very comic book look, which is really cool. And even the paint, like he's very white at the front of his face, but then you get kind of more gray as you go back, so it's that kind of like highlighted drawing style. And even his helmet, if you look, has a very animated style to it. It kind of has like sloppy lines around the camo pattern on there and everything. So I kind of feel like this is some of the stuff that NECA's done with their Ninja Turtles line, doing some of the kind of animated stylings, and they've almost kind of brought it over here to Sergeant D. And while I don't like it on some figures when they do it, I actually really love it here. It gives it this very cool, just punk rock, heavy metal look to it. So he's got the different like symbols there on his helmet, and then the helmet is removable, but super underwhelming. He's bald as Scott Ian is. Yeah, it looks decent. It looks fine. It carries on that sculpt of the dried up looking skin. You can see the white kind of goes up his forehead and then stops, and then you get a little bit of a highlight there on the back as well. One thing is, you really don't get a lot of that sculpt on the neck. It's really just painted to kind of mirror it, but his collar comes up high enough that it doesn't really matter so much. Going further down the figure, this is the retro style, so he does have the cloth clothing on him. So you see his collar is all ragged and torn up, looking pretty good. It's got a little like band thing. I don't know what that's called. The top of his shoulder looking ragged. Everything on here is just rough looking. Everything has like torn up edges. The problem with this scale is that the stitching is as small as it can get, I assume, but it just still looks big because it's stitching on a very small costume. But it looks okay. I do like that he has the on the one pocket there and the Sergeant D up there on his chest. Flip him around, not really much else to talk about. Not really much detailing on the back at all. If we go down a little further, we have his belt. Really cool looking. It has that military style clasp on there. He's got enough pouches on there to make Rob Liefeld happy. Spin him around. We can see it does look removable. It looks like there's 2 pegs back here. I don't really want to mess with mine because sometimes I'm afraid those things won't go back on quite so easily once you unpeg them. It actually looks adjustable too. So I wonder if they are planning to use this on multiple figures, or maybe they already have used it on multiple figures. But the belt's pretty simple, but I do like that there is some paint apps for the buttons and the buckle on there. And I think there's actually a little bit of dry brushing there on the pouches themselves to make them look leathery. It does have a nice contrast of textures and definitely helps break up the very drab uniform that he's wearing here. On his arms, you can see the arm is partly sculpted, which is good because his sleeves don't come all the way down. And then we have his kind of zombie looking hand. So his left hand is designed to hold the gun. Actually, both hands are really designed to hold the gun. He's got his nasty looking little fingernails in there. But one's an open hand on his left to hold the front of the gun. Then he has his trigger finger there on the right. Now, this looks to be the exact same arms we got on the 2 Minutes to Midnight Eddie figure from Iron Maiden, but it's a very similar design. They painted it this lighter gray with the white highlights on it. So while it's pretty recognizable as the arms from Eddie, it's not that cheap feeling of a reuse. It works for this. Going down to the legs, pretty much the same as the top. It's the same kind of olive drab color. He's got some torn up pockets there on either side of his cargo pants. Nothing really to speak of. The bottom's also ripped up above the boots. And then he has his military style boots on here. Now, I didn't take long enough to look and see if these boots were used elsewhere on other figures. They are not the same ones that the 2 Minutes to Midnight Eddie has. So that's the only thing I could tell you is they didn't use that much more of the body. But I'm pretty confident if I look hard enough, there's somebody else using these boots because they're kind of very standard. They almost look like Michael Myers boots maybe. I don't know. But they're decent. They're just black. No real paint detail. They do have the treads in the bottom though. Some detailing on the bottom. Some peg holes as well. Simple enough. They get the job done. Articulation is still the thing that keeps me from loving these retro cloth figures. All the ones I have are currently on display in the box, which is incredibly weird for me just because I really don't like having them loose. They are just not as posable as I'd like them to be, but he does have a ball joint at the head, so we can go left, right. We can look up, not very much. We can look down, not very much either. You can also tilt at the head. The arms are on, I guess, pin and sockets probably, so you can go forward, back, as well as out to the side. Good amount out to the side too. Looks like we have an upper bicep swivel here. Single joint elbow moves about 90 degrees. We can rotate and hinge at the wrist. It's the same direction of hinge for both wrists there. Think it's a ball joint here at the torso. He definitely has a swivel at least. Feels like there's a little forward and back motion, but I can't honestly tell you if that's intentional. So I'm going to say it's a cut joint at the waist. I don't think it's any more than that. Legs can kick forward a little bit, back not much at all. They got to the side, limited very much by the clothing there. Feels like we have an upper thigh swivel. Single jointed knee bends about 45 degrees. Not the best. And they're still using these damn ankle joints where it's just a hinge. No ball joint or pivot or anything, which is really the killer on these guys. It really prevents you from getting them into cool poses just because you can't get those feet flat on the ground. And I would honestly be much cooler with this line. They've improved a lot of things in this line over the years, but these ankle joints still kill me on every release. For a size comparison, let's bring in our United Forces of heavy metal mascots here from NECA. On the left, we have Vic Rattlehead. In the center, of course, Sergeant D. We have Eddie. And as I mentioned, this is the 2 Minutes to Midnight Eddie. You can see those arms are the same. He has the same hands as well, but he actually looks like he stands a fair bit shorter than Sergeant D. So I'm inclined to think he's using a different body. It looks like Vic is also using a larger body than Eddie is. So I'm assuming they must have updated the buck here at some point. But these three do look pretty cool together. It looks like Sergeant D and Eddie are ready to go off to war, and Vic is ready to sell some real estate? I don't know. NECA, let us complete this set and give us a so far so good so what version of Vic. That would be fantastic. Honestly, I would take a Rust in Peace version too, but just to get this whole military style so far so good so what would be badass. So there's our Sergeant D figure, a character I never thought we'd get in plastic form, but I am actually pretty darn happy with him. Despite some of the things I've said in this review, I have softened on this line a bit. I was very against it when it first came out. The sculpts were relatively soft looking, very cartoony, Mego-y style, and I get that's the point, but I just didn't like how kind of lame people looked, especially horror characters, which is a lot of their early releases. I think bringing in this stylized animated style that I actually don't like so much in the fully plastic figures and carrying it over to these that are supposed to be more representations of album covers and things actually works for me. I don't know where the distinction in my head is where it works here and it doesn't work there, but I'm digging it. I am down with them doing these kind of releases, and I'm thrilled to see them doing some weirder stuff. For a while, I kind of felt like NECA was an endless string of Predators and Aliens, and it kind of burnt me out. So it's nice to go pick up something that's just fresh and different. And I know some people who probably aren't into this kind of music are looking at like, wait, didn't they do like 8 versions of this guy when, looking at Eddie or whatever? But to those of us that are in the know, that like heavy metal, it's a neat addition to our collection. And I am happy to build up these music-inspired figures. I think they're really neat, and I guess I should just be glad that my music tastes align with Randy in getting these things, and I'm not sitting here dreading NECA's next release of some country music bumpkin. But yeah, Sergeant D is going to get a qualified recommend. I kind of can't imagine anybody's going to really give a crap if they don't like SOD, but if you are a fan, this is a neat thing to pick up. It's cool to have, and I really am excited to see them do more. Like I said, I would love to see some other versions of Vic. Still want to see them continue on with Eddie. There's some classic versions we've never gotten, especially Number of the Beast, the most iconic Iron Maiden album. Never gotten a figure of that from NECA. I think McFarlane did one years and years ago, but such an iconic version of Eddie we haven't gotten, and that bugs me to no end. It'd be so cool to have. And while we're at it, and I'm just pipe dreaming up some figures, come on NECA, our lords and masters of Gwar. We need an odorous figure in this style. Do it.
Don't make me have to destroy you.
But anyway, that's enough heavy metal ranting from me. Like I said, qualified recommend for this guy. If you love the band, I think it's worth picking up. And let me know in the comments down below, what music-inspired figure would you like to see next from NECA? And until next time, it's been our Outside the Box review. I'll see you guys in the pit.